بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي جعل ذكره طمأنينة للقلوب وجلاء لها عن رين الذنوب ومطرة لوسواس الخناس المكذوب، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد الداعي إلى كل فعل محبوب وأمر مطلوب، وعلى آله وأصحابه المقتفين سبيله على خير أسلوب. أما بعد، فيقول رب تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المنزل بعد أن أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا. Say, O Muhammad, shall we inform you of the greatest losers as to their deeds? They are those whose effort in this world is lost in this worldly life while they think that they are doing good work. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our 20th lecture, which is our final lecture in this term. And as you know, we missed 3 classes due to my illness. And we're now left with one session in which to read from the chapter of Ikhlas proper, which is the main aim of the book, which is the main aim of this course, is for us to be able to configure Ikhlas, to know what Ikhlas is. These last 4 lectures were supposed to be focused on that. So I want to cover as much as I can do, and inshallah, this week then I will not go through a point-by-point summary of what we did last week. I will just to jog your memory in one sentence. Last week, what we learned was that motive, niyyah, intention, does not change the status of sinful deeds as it does with good deeds. Because if you're doing something good with a bad intention, then that renders it bad. That undermines it. But if you have bad deeds, then no amount of good intention will change it, except in some extremely rare cases, which I've covered when we spoke about afat al-lisan, the calamities of the tongue, which inshallah we'll go over next term, next year, next academic year, inshallah. But good deeds, as we say, can become bad through corruption, and this is also related to a common fitna nowadays, a scheme of corruption, where we want to do whatever we want. People allow their desires to fashion their Islam, and they say, well, look, I don't have to do anything. As long as I have the love for Islam in my heart, my Islam is in my heart. I don't have to wear hijab. I don't have to eat proper Islamic food. I don't have to do anything because I have good intentions. It's all in my heart. And I usually give an example for this kind of person. Of a person who is at work. He goes to work every day, but does nothing of his duties allocated to him. And then when he's questioned, his defense, his explanation is that, yes, I might not be doing all these things, but I have a lot of love for the company, for this company in which I'm work. You don't know how much I love this company. What do you expect the answer would be? They would say, well, look, you are okay. Thank you very much for loving the company, but you have to do. Islam is both practice and belief. It's mental and physical. Now, the other thing that is related to this is that human beings are hopeless. I mean, when it comes to navigating their own moral issues, without divine guidance specifically, we assume always that we are able to find a compass, to create our own compass, but we end up in trouble. And this is throughout history. You can find this. If I remember correctly, I think it was Herodotus who wrote about a conversation to show how far human beings drift, and you only have to look at the modern world today and how many things we were confused about, so yeah, this story about Herodotus, he mentioned a conversation that happened, I think it was in the court of Darius. Yeah, probably, yeah, the court of Darius. But anyway, a tribe of people had been brought from the Far East, and they were in the court, and they were told that it was the practice of the people who they were visiting to cremate their dead ancestors. And when they said that, this group of people became completely horrified at such a prospect, that is what you do to your people, to your dead. It was clearly something that was way beyond their moral compass, something to do. And then the people asked them, so what do you do with your dead? They said that we eat them instead. And then so the other side said were equally horrified. So Herodotus was quoted this conversation to show how the extent to which human beings can drift. And this is true. I mean, we if you a few weeks ago, I saw a news item of a man who paid $12,000 to become his dog, to look like his dog. So he wore the whole thing. Another woman just married herself, and all sorts of things. I mean, I don't have to go through the list. Our moral compass can easily get knocked off track when we are disconnected from guidance. We need guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our sense of value, our knowing of what is good and what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, must be derived from guidance sent by our Creator, the one who knows us more than we know ourselves. So that was another reason why we need to recognize that that saying that, oh, my Islam is in my heart, is not sufficient. Practice is important. Practice is necessary. Also, I want to leave some time at the end to talk about this the extraordinary power of retention of the Arabs, which I've been promising you for the past 2 weeks. Now, the topics we discussed in the previous 19 sessions were all tamheed. They were all laying the groundwork, the preparation for this topic. The topic is Ikhlas. Because last week we did intention, what is intention? And before that we did khumul and riya and hubbullah. All of these are laying the preparation, the preparatory steps for the mind for ikhlas. So, and now in the second part of the book, and this book has this second part has 5 chapters actually. It's for Fadilatul Ikhlas, the virtue of sincerity, Haqiqatul Ikhlas, the true reality of Ikhlas, Aqwal al-Shuyukh fil Ikhlas, the sayings of the scholars in regard to Ikhlas, Darajat al-Shawa'ib, the degrees of contaminants, and then Al-Hukm ala al-Amal al-Mashub, that ruling on tainted actions, and what reward do they deserve. Now, obviously, we wouldn't be able to cover all 5 of these chapters in one sitting, but what I intend to do is to summarize much as possible, and then next term, inshallah, if Allah keeps us alive, we will go over them in greater detail if need be. Now, for the first chapter, which is Fadilatul Ikhlas, the virtue of sincerity, which is the virtue of Ikhlas. Well, why do we need this? I had said this in the beginning. If you remember, I talked about the need for urgency in this. We need to have a sense of urgency when it comes to Ikhlas, because it is it's the most pressing issue for our deen. If Rasulullah saw the Sahaba speaking about Dajjal, and he said that I'm more worried. Shall I tell you what I'm more worried for you than Dajjal? And he said it's the shirk al-khafi, the loss of ikhlas, not having ikhlas. And on the opening scene on the Day of Judgment will also be about ikhlas, where the alim, the scholar, the martyr, and the philanthropist, the philanthropist will be told that, look, you all you did, everything you did was to show, was for people. You didn't do it for me. You lied. Now, and so it is the virtue of this cannot be the need and the necessity for studying and wanting to implement ikhlas in your life cannot be overemphasized. Now, in this chapter, Imam Ghazali starts by mentioning, let me Yep. By mentioning 4 verses of the Quran, from the Quran. Okay, we'll take one. This was the one from Surah Kahf. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه, that whoever intends, whoever is looking forward to meeting Allah, who is hopeful in meeting Allah, then فليعمل عملا صالحا, so he should do good deeds, ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه, and do not include anyone else in it. He should not include anyone else in it. ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. He should not include anyone. Well, and this is and Imam Ghazali is commenting on this ayah. He said, "نزلت في من يعمل لله ويحب أن يحمد عليه." That this was revealed as a person who was doing things from doing things for Allah, but at the same time he loved to have people praise him for it. And hadith, he says, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاث لا يغل عليهن قلب رجل مسلم وإخلاص العمل. He said there are 3 things that you will not, that a person will not have anchor for in a Muslim's heart, and one of them, of course, is ikhlas. The other 2 was مناصحة للأمراء ومناصحة, giving good advice to the leaders of Muslims, the rulers, and also keeping to the jama'ah, keeping to the group of Muslimin. عن مصعب بن سعد عن أبيه قال ظن أبي أن له فضلا على من دونه من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is the Sahabi saying that my father felt that he had some higher status than others who were around the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said to him, إنما, that the lowly people, poor people who are often looked down on in society, and he had some class complex, that look, I'm from a higher class, it's like today where I'm an Oxford person and I look down on people who are from Hull or some other place, so that class thing. So he's saying here, إنما نصر الله عز وجل هذه الأمة that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help for this ummah بضعفائها ودعوتهم وإخلاصهم وصلاتهم. He mentions 4 things that is the reason for Allah's help of this ummah, which comes 4 things that makes Allah helps this ummah from the du'afa, from the weak, from the low people, the people who you think are low, the people who you look down upon. Is the first is that they're weak. Because of that, Allah helps the ummah. The second is because of their action, their dua, their supplication. And the third is their ikhlas. And the fourth is their salah. Because of them. So, and this hadith, it comes in other reports in Bukhari. It's هل تنصرون وترزقون إلا بضعفائكم. That are you given help and are you given risk except through the poor among you, الضعفاء, the weak among you, the weak and the poor among you. Because of them you are being fed. So the rich person should not think that, look, somehow I'm disconnected. It's because of them you're being helped. وعن الحسن قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول الله تعالى الإخلاص سر من سري. That ikhlas is a mystery among my mysteries. استودعته قلب من أحببت من عبادي. That I place that this is a mystery that I place in the hearts of those of my servants that I love. Okay, so that's ikhlas. Okay, one more. وعن علي بن أبي طالب كرم الله وجهه قال, he says, لا تهتموا بقلة العمل. He said, do not worry too much about you're not doing large amounts of amal, of good deeds, of righteous deeds. واهتموا للقبول, but be very concerned about its acceptance. Whether Allah, when you do something, think about whether it's being accepted. Abundance of charity without acceptance is of no use, and in fact can turn around and become wabal, can become calamity. فإن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لمعاذ بن جبل أخلص العمل يجزئك منه القليل. So do whatever you're doing with ikhlas for Allah alone, then a little action may suffice you. Okay. So that was, well, as much as we were going to read from Ikhlas, from Fadila. And then let's see. Okay, there's one here. This is in summary. Al-ilmu bidrun. Yuqalu al-ilmu bidrun wal-amalu zar'un wa ma'uhu al-ikhlas. So knowledge is the seed and action is the planting of it. Knowledge is the seed and the planting is your actions, your good deeds that you do. But there is a third thing that you need for your actions to sprout, to bear fruit. What is that? Water. And he says, وَمَاءُهُ إِخْلَاص. So if you remember the simple formula, that everything you do, it has to have that water of ikhlas. Okay. We'll بيان حقيقة الإخلاص, the exposition, بيان of the true meaning of إخلاص. وأن كل شيء يتصور أن يشوبه غيره فإذا صفى عن شوبه وخلص عنه سمي خالصا. Everything that is capable of accepting contamination or adulteration, and if all its contaminants are removed, then it is known as خالص. It is known as pure. ويسمى الفعل المصفى المخلص إخلاصا, and so it is the actions that is clear, that is pure, is known as إخلاص. وقال الله تعالى من بين فرث ودم لبنا خالصا صائغا للشاربين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that between excretion and blood, Allah brings pure milk that is palatable, صائغا للشاربين, that is favorable for people to drink. So that's the kind of purity. Milk is a good example. وإنما خلوص اللبن أن لا يكون فيه شوب من الدم والفرث. So the purity of milk is that it should not have anything of blood or excretion in it. ومن كل ما يمكن and anything else that can also be contaminated. والإخلاص يضاده الإشراك. That ikhlas is the opposite to partnership. فمن ليس مخلصا فهو مشرك. That whoever is not a mukhlis, a person who is not completely sincere, then he is mushrik. He is mushrik. إلا أن للشرك درجات, except that there are different types of shirk, there are different degrees of shirk, different degrees of polytheism. فالإخلاص في التوحيد يضاده التشريك في الإلهية, which is polytheism. Ishraq, if you have a contaminated understanding or a view or belief in the oneness of Allah, then that is polytheism. So he said, وأن فالإخلاص في الألوهية والشرك منه خفي ومنه جلي. And shirk has the hidden aspects of hidden shirk and apparent shirk. كالإخلاص, just as shirk has hidden aspects and apparent and open apparent aspects, so it is with ikhlas. فالإخلاص وضده يتواردان على القلب. So ikhlas is and its opposite, which is shirk, they flow on the heart. يتواردان على القلب فمحله القلب. This is the place. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taqwa ha huna. Pointing to the chest, to the breast. وإنما يكون ذلك في القصد والنيات, and it's related to the motives and the intentions. وقد ذكرنا حقيقة النية, and we have studied the true meaning of niyyah, and you will understand now why we went through all those degrees of it and what we spoke about. وأنها ترجع إلى إجابة البواعث فمهما كان الباعث واحدا على التجرد, and it says that it all returns to having one, the motive, and whenever the motive is it becomes unified, becomes one. Whenever the motive is one, becomes unified from all others and is purified from all other motives, سمي فعل الصادر عنه إخلاصا. Then the action that emanates from that is called إخلاص. بالإضافة إلى المنوي, whatever it in relation to whatever it is, it is aimed at completion, at completing. فمن تصدق وغرضه محض الرياء فهو مخلص. And this is an interesting sentence. He says, فمن تصدق وغرضه محض الرياء, that whoever gives charity and his motive is to show and to show alone, nothing else. So he is a mukhlis. This person is sincere, but what he has mukhlis. فمن كان غرضه محض التقرب إلى الله تعالى, and who also has a pure and a single, a unified intention for gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person is also a mukhlis. They're both mukhlis, right? Because its purity is just one intention. ولكن العادة جارية بتخصيص اسم الإخلاص بتجريد قصد التقرب إلى الله تعالى عن جميع الشوائب. But it has become the aada, the custom, the way of use, the language has specified the language, the use of the language has become, it's the aada, it's now the convention that we use ikhlas only for taqarrub ila Allah, only for getting close to Allah from all contaminants, all other types of corrupting influences. كما أن الإلحاد عبارة عن الميل. And he gives another example. He says just as atheism, the real meaning of atheism is inclination, to incline towards something else, a diversion, الميل. ولكن خصصته العادة بالميل عن الحق. But then its usage has become dominant in the use of diversion from the truth. ومن كان باعثه مجرد الرياء فهو معرض للهلاك. And whoever's motive is only in riyah, then that person is exposed to destruction. And this is not what we were speaking about. We've spoken about this in verse. وأقل الأمور ما ورد في الخبر أن المرائي يدعى يوم. And if there's one thing you will remember, the least you will remember about this, then think about this, that on the day of judgment, you will be called by 4 names. A person who is a show-off, whose actions are just to show, then you will be called by 4 names. Ya mura'i, O show-off, you ostentatious person. Ya mukhadi', O deceiver. Ya mushrik, O polytheist, the one who is ascribing, who is including others with Allah. Wa ya kafir, and the disbeliever. وإنما نتكلم الآن في من انبعث القصد التقرب. This is about having the intention in your heart to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. ولكن امتزج بهذه الباعث. Now, if you have this intention, but then there are other impulses that have come upon it. بهذا الباعث باعث آخر, a motive, إما من رياء أو من غير أو من حظوظ النفس, in other worldly fortunes. ومثال ذلك, and an example of that, he's saying that, look, أن يسوم, and this was the reason why we went through all those details about the degrees and the various configurations of intention when we were studying niyyah. So you to understand this, he says أن يسوم لينتفع, that person أن يسوم لينتفع بالحمية الحاصلة من الصوم. He said a person may do it because of some building the immune system, or fast because he wants to increase his health, مع قصد التقرب, and he also has intention to get close to Allah. أو يعتق عبدا, or he frees a slave because the slave is bothering him and there's lots of he has bad conduct. أو يحج ليصح مزاجه بحركة السفر, or he goes to Hajj because he wants to improve his psychology, his temperament. He wants a change of the atmosphere. He wants to go on a holiday. أو ليتلخص من شر أو ليتخلص من شر يعرض له في بلده, or he wants to run away from some harm that is in his city, or ليهرب من عدو, or he wants to get away from an enemy where he lives, or يتبرم بأهله وولده, or his family is giving him too much trouble, so he just wants to run away. ويستريح, he wants to rest, get some rest أياما, for some time. Okay, so, and then he goes on, اشتغل بالدرس الواعظ, and he gives many examples. And he's saying here, كتب مصحا رائحته فمهما كان باعثه هو التقرب إلى الله. Now, as long as his intention is to please Allah, to get close to Allah, ولكن انضاف إليه خطرة, that there another thoughts have entered upon it. هذه الخطرات حتى صار العمل أخف عليه بسبب هذه الأمور. And because these things, these contaminants have come into it, it makes it easier for him, because he has more motives, more motivation, and then it becomes easier. فقد خرج عمله عن حد الإخلاص. Then in that case, then he would have removed himself from the circle of ikhlas. He cannot be called mukhlis. وخرج أن يكون خالصا لوجه الله. It is no longer for the pleasure, purely for the pleasure of Allah. وتطرق الشرك إليه, and then shirk has entered upon what he has done. وقد قال الله تعالى, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وأنا أغنى الشركاء عن الشرك. I am most independent from all partnership. Allah does not need partnership. So in summary, كل حظ من حظوظ الدنيا تستريح إليه النفس. All the worldly fortunes through which the nafs, the desires are pleased, ويميل إليه القلب, and which the heart inclines to, قل أم كثر, whether it is tiny, whether it's a small amount or a large amount, إذا تطرق إلى العمل, if it enters upon your deeds, then تكدر به صفه, then it has tainted the purity of your action. It has tainted it. وزال به إخلاصه, and the ikhlas has been removed. والإنسان مرتبطة في عضوده, and what people are generally involved in their fortunes, and منغمس في شهواته, and they are engrossed in their desires. قلما ينفك فعل من أفعاله وعبادة من عباداته عن حدود أو أغراض عاجل في هذه الأجناس. And it is seldom that a person is completely removed, it's completely disconnected from these sorts of fortunes, even in their actions, in their ibadah, in their goals and aims and aspirations in life. فلذلك قيل من سلم له في عمره, for the person, there's خطوة واحدة. If you have one step, if the person whose one step is خالص, is completely pure, لوجه الله تعالى نجا, that you will be successful. Just with one خطوة, one step you make, if you manage to get that purified from all these things that are constantly flowing in the mind, and the fortunes of the world, and the engrossed in the desires and the heart, seeking benefit from it in this world. If you manage to get one thing done, then that could become your saving grace. That could become the thing that will save you on the day of judgment. ولذلك لعزة الإخلاص, and this is for the honor of ikhlas. وعسر تنقية القلب عن هذه الشوائب, بل الإخلاص هو الذي لا باعث عليه إلا طلب القرب من الله. So ikhlas, it is difficult to cleanse, to pull it all out and just keep it only for one, because things come onto it. They naturally come, and ikhlas is the one that has the only Allah. وهذه الحظوظ إن كانت هي الباعثة وحدها فلا يخفى شدة الأمر على صاحبه. And if وهذه الحظوظ, these fortunes, إن كان هي الباعث, if these fortunes is the motive, فلا يخفى شدة الأمر, so the severity on such a person is not hidden. وإنما نظرنا فيما كان إذا كان القصد الأصلي هو التقرب. So our purpose here is to look into the situation where إذا كان القصد الأصلي هو التقرب. If the original motive was to seek Allah's pleasure. That is what we have to look at. If the original one is, and then وَانْضَافَتْ إِلَيْهِ هَذِهِ الْأُمُورِ, but then these things then were added to it later on. There are additional that came on. ثم هذه الشوائب إما أن تكون في رتبة الموافقة, and these contaminants sometimes they may be at the level of muwafaqa, which is to confirming what is there. It's agreeable. أو في رتبة المشاركة, or at the stage of partnership. أو في رتبة المعاونة, or at the stage in a level of assistance. كما سبق في بيان النية. Do you remember when we spoke about those 4 configurations of niyyah, how it works? So this is what happens with your ikhlas. وبالجملة فإما يكون الباعث النفسي مثل الباعث الديني. So it may be, he said that in summary, this is how it will be. It will be that your nafs, the motive of the nafs will be similar to the motive of your deed. أو أقوى, or stronger than it, or weaker, أو أضعف. ولكل واحد حكم آخر. And for each, كما سنذكر, and for each of these are specific rulings. In other words, the ruling on what is the consequence of this in the akhirah are different, for depending on when they're strong, when they're weak, when they're equal. وإنما الإخلاص تخليص العمل عن هذه الشوائب كلها. Ikhlas is, the aim of ikhlas is to purify them from all of these contaminants, all of these interfering other motives. But he says تلخيص العمل عن هذه الشوائب كلها قليلها وكثيرها, that the small of it and the large of it, and the حتى يتجرد فيه قصد التقرب, until it becomes completely clear it's only for Allah. فلا يكون فيه باعث سواه, that there shouldn't be any other motive in his heart. وهذا لا يتصور إلا, and but this is not possible. This is not imaginable that this can happen, except for what? Doesn't it? Where? Except for what? Except إلا من محب لله تعالى مستهتر به, except for the one who loves Allah. Now you understand why we did several sessions on loving Allah. That in order to have ikhlas, you have to have love for Allah. That love has to take, the love for Allah has to take the place of love for the dunya and for everything in it. That Allah is more, that everything you have is from Allah. Allah gave you this. So if you love this, then love the one who has given you it. Love the one who has created you. Love the one who has placed it, made it possible for you to attain it. So he's saying that لا يتصور إلا من محب لله, that you will not be able to find it except for a person. It is unimaginable for this to happen except from one who loves Allah. ومستهتر به, and the one who is wholeheartedly engrossed in the love of Allah. ومستغرق الهم بالآخرة, and also the one who is engrossed in concern for the akhirah. مستغرق is that he has his concern of the akhirah is above his concern for the dunya. If he doesn't get what's in the dunya, then he doesn't blame Allah. He accepts the qadr. He says that this is qadarullah, أنا راضٍ بقدر الله. I accept that this is qadarullah. You try to get out of things in this world. وبحيث لم يبقى لحب الدنيا في قلبه قرار. So that there's no space in his heart for the love of the dunya. حتى لا يحب. Okay, so we're going to jump from there. He's saying like a person who eats and then he has كان خالص العمل الصحيح النية في جميع حركاته. فلو نام, a person may eat and he has an intention to get the strength that he will get from it, he will use it in if to please Allah. So that is but then you have other reasons for it, the good taste, all the other stuff that comes in. فإذا إعلاج الإخلاص كسر حدود النفس. The correction and the purification, the curing for ikhlas is kasru hudud al-nafs. It's to break that connection with the self-fortunes, the seeking of self-fortunes. وقطع الطمع عن الدنيا, and to eradicate, to cut it completely. To cut what? Covetousness. Because today our problem is covetousness, and the shaitan has made it possible for he fosters covetousness, like make you see things that other people have and want to covet what other people have. He says, well, you deserve it. You look at what they have, and look at what they have, and look at what they have. In the olden days, shops used to have a little door, and you went there and said you want X, Y, and Z. Now you have to go and see everything. You go to buy a 50 pence bread, and you come out with 50 pounds of stuff, because you want everything. When the eye sees it, it takes it. So and thinking about the akhirah and purifying it, cleansing it for akhirah, and this is the thing. It's about the measurement, so that the dominance of concern for the akhirah. What have I done for akhirah today? That the things that I've gathered for my dunya will all be left here, and my product, my collection for today. What did I prepare for my akhirah today? At the end of the day, what did I do? Yes, I earned X number of pounds, and I did X, Y, and Z. But what did I earn for my akhirah today? That concern has to be such that the concern for akhirah is dominant in the mind. فإذا ذاك يتيسر للإخلاص. This comes through إخلاص. وكم من أعمال يتعب الإنسان فيها ويظن أنها خالصة لوجه الله ويكون فيها مغرور. He said, how many deeds that a person does, and he thinks that he's doing it khalis for Allah. And this is the trick, is that if you ask anybody if you have ikhlas, they're doing it. I'm doing it for Allah. I have ikhlas. Yeah, I have some problems, but no, I'm a sincere person of what we do. But we don't realize we have a lot of husn al-dhan about ourselves, and su'uzan, we have good opinion about ourselves and bad opinion about everyone else, when it should be the other way around. We should be suspicious of our nafs. And here it tells you is a beautiful explanation of how this happens. He says, and this is in the verse we read, I've read in the beginning, that you do good deeds and think you're doing good, but it's all wasted. كما حكي أن بعضهم يقول قضيت صلاة. And this story is very important. Remember the story. He said that they said قضيت صلاة 30 سنة كنت صليتها في المسجد في الصف الأول. He said, I spent 30 years praying in the masjid in the first row. Now, when you see someone pray in the first row, and he's for 30 years he's praying in the first row, then that is a pious person. Yeah. So he said, لأني, but then he said, لأني تأخرت يوما لعذر, but then one day I got delayed for some reason. فصليت في الصف الثاني, and then I was forced to pray in the second row in the prayer. فاعترتني خجلة من الناس حيث رأوني في الصف الثاني. He said that then I was gripped with a shame, an embarrassment, that people will see me now today in the second row. That I've been praying in the first row for 30 years, and now suddenly today I'm in the second row. I'm praying, and then he contemplated what that meant. What did that mean? That feeling, the sense of shame. Why did shame come? Why did he feel embarrassed? He says, فعرفت, and then I realized أن نظر الناس إلي في الصف الأول كان مسرتي وسبب استراحة قلبي من حيث لا أشعر. He said, and then I realized that that praying in the first row was actually a reason through which I derived joy. I derived happiness, and it was the reason through which I felt good in my heart for being in that place. حيث لا يشعر, and I did not even realize it. For 30 years I've been praying, and my salah had been tainted terribly with this, because I'm in the first row and I think that I'm doing good. So he said, وهذا دقيق غامض, and said that this is obtuse, it's subtle. وقلما تسلم الأعمال من أمثاله, and it is seldom our actions pure or purified from such problems. وقل من ينتبه له إلا من وفقه الله. And seldom do people realize, seldom do people people able to pay attention to this problem. والغافلون عنه يرون حسناتهم كلها في الآخرة سيئات. And the ghafil, the people, they will see on the day of judgment all their good deeds. The people who are ghafil, the people who are negligent, who do not pay attention to these things, will end up on the day of judgment. They will see it all as sayyi'at. Their good deeds will be recorded as sins. وهم المرادون بقوله تعالى. And they are the people who are mentioned in the Quran. وبدأ من الله ما لم يكونوا يحتسبون. That look, something from Allah will confront them. وبدأ لهم من الله. And something from them will ما لم يكن, which they did not expect. وبدأ لهم سيئات ما كسبوا. And then they will be confronted with the bad deeds that they did. And then قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم. Did I not tell you of the people of the worst and biggest losers? They are the people who do good, who do سعيهم, that their work in this world is wasted, and they continue to think that they're doing good. Move on. فمعرفة حقيقة الإخلاص والعمل به بحر عميق. So knowing this is a vast ocean. ويغرق فيه الجميع, and we're all drowned in this. إلا الشاذ, except the exceptional ones. وهو المستثنى, and this is the accepted one, the ones who goes against the rule. Here he says إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين, except Allah's servants who are truly sincere. فليكن العبد شديد التفقد. So let everyone be extremely vigilant. شديد التفقد والمراقبة لهذه الدقائق. That let him in search, extreme caution and monitoring and vigilance about these details. إلا وإلا, and if he doesn't do this, if you don't do this, التحق بأتباع الشياطين وهو لا يشعر. That he will then join the followers of shaitan without realizing it. Remember what we said? What was the worst thing than jahal? This is jahal. And the worst jahal is al-jahlu bil-jahl. That the ignorance of ignorance. The worst type is the one al-jahlu bil-jahl. The ones who are complete, who do not know and do not realize, and they think that they know. Okay. Oh, there we've. Okay. أقوال الشيوخ. Let me see. أي شيء أشد النفس. We'll skip that and I'll go straight to darajat. We can't do darajat as well, but I need to do hukm, the ruling, because I don't want you to leave you becoming parishan. You get to depressed if we don't tell you that there are different rulings on this. Yeah. So here he's saying حكم على عمل المشوب أن العمل إذا لم يكن خالصا لوجه الله تعالى بل امتزج به شوب من الرياء والحظوظ. That if an action is mixed, it's not clearly for Allah, but it's tainted by contaminants. فقد اختلف في أن ذلك يقتضي ثواب. So in such an action, you have an intention to please Allah, but the other things come into it, but they are not as strong. The scholars are divided on whether you get reward or not. أم يقتضي عقابا, and whether you will be punished according to on the basis of the أما لا يقتضي أصلا فلا يكون أصله. أما الذي لم يرد به إلا الرياء. As for the one who did not intend anything but riya, then فهو عليه قط. That person is definitely in wrong. He will be in sin. وهو سبب المقت, and it is the والعقاب, and it is the reason for punishment and for Allah's dislike. وأما الخالص لوجه الله, and the one that is pure for the sake of Allah, فهو سبب الثواب. وإنما النظر في المشوب. Now we are looking for the one that is tainted. وظاهر الأخبار, and the it appears from the reports, the hadith, تدل على أنه لا ثواب عليه, that there's no لا ثواب عليه, that there's no reward that the person will not get if it's tainted. وليس تخلو الأخبار عن تعارض فيه, and there is some conflicting reports about it. والذي يقدح والذي ينقدح لنا فيه والعلم عند الله. He said the thing that we have gathered from this, well, what we have extracted from it, أن ينظر إلى قدر قوة الباعث, is that you look at the intensity of the motive. فإن كان الباعث الديني مساويا للباعث النفسي, that if the motive of the deen, if motive for something that is for deen is same as the one for your nafs, تقاوم وتساقط وصار العمل له الولاء عليه. If it's equal, then that destroys. Then that is as if it's كالعدم. It is like if it's nothing. It's sufficient for punishment. وإن كان باعث الرياء أغلب وأقوى, and if the motive for showing is stronger and more powerful, فهو ليس بنافع بل هو مع ذلك المضر والمقتدي للعقاب. It is for punishment if it's stronger. نعم العقاب الذي فيه أخف من عقاب العمل الذي تجرد للرياء. So but the punishment in that is less than the action that is done purely for riyah, because there is some degree of intention for doing good in it, but it's tainted with riyah. وإن كان قصد التقرب أغلب بالإضافة إلى الباعث, but if the motive is stronger, for the motive for gaining closeness to Allah is stronger here, then in that case فله ثواب, then he will get reward according to the level, بقدر ما فضل من قوة الباعث الديني, that he will get reward according to the level of the intensity, the level, the strength of that intention. وهذا لقوله, and how did he, on what is he basing this on? He's saying that you have a good intention, but then some other things come along, but you can have two motives running in the mind together, or three. So he's saying that for the good one, you can get reward for it if it is dominant, but if it is the weakest, then no. So he's saying that look, and his the place where he's deriving this from is from the Quran. He's saying وهذا لقوله تعالى فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يرى, that whoever does an atom's weight of good, he will see it. ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يرى, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil, he will see it. ولقوله تعالى إن الله لا يظلم مثقال ذرة, and also for the verse where Allah says that Allah does not oppress, he does not commit injustice in the slightest, not even an atom's weight. فلا ينبغي أن يضيع قصد الخير, so we should not waste our opportunities for خير. بل إن كان غالبا على القصد الرياء حبط منه القدر. If it becomes, if the riyah is dominant in it, that the entire thing, the entire action collapses. وبقيت زيادة وإن كان مغلوبا أسقط بسببه شيء من عقوبة القصد. And according to the level of the riyah in it, that will also dictate the level of the punishment in it. Okay, I want to leave a few minutes to, I think I'll stop here. Inshallah, we can come back to this next term, but inshallah, that much should be sufficient. So in summary, it is that Ikhlas is to aim for, to get close to Allah, to make sure that whatever you do, the number one, the highest motive in your mind should be that for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so now the other thing that I want to talk to you about, which I promised, and it has a serious aspect to it, which is that the power of attention of the Arabs, and that in fact I had promised you to speak about a funny story about memory, but in the broader context, there's a serious need to familiarize ourselves of this aspect of the history as well, like I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. And why do we need to do this? To protect ourselves from another fitna, another scheme for instilling doubt in the minds of believers. And what is the scheme? The scheme is to draw a parallel in your mind between the Arab oral tradition and the concept of Chinese whispers, which you all know what Chinese whispers is. In fact, some postmodernists have even gone as far as labeling it as Arab whispers in their writings. They call it Arab whispers because they want to draw a strong parallel between the oral tradition and Chinese whispers. And the aim, of course, is to dismiss everything in the oral tradition as unreliable, as Chinese whispers, where the first utterance is usually completely different from the final utterance, the last utterance. But of course, there's a big distinction that is completely lost in this comparison between Chinese whispers and the Arab oral tradition. In the first one, in the Chinese whispers, you're required, the secrecy is required and speaking silently, while the Arab oral tradition can only flourish with loud and public recitals. For example, we read the whole Quran loudly in public during the month of Ramadan. And if a mistake is made, then the biggest imam is corrected by a young child. He can be corrected from a child. The correction can come from a child. And the same for hadith. Reading hadith publicly was a big tradition. When Imam Bukhari arrived in Baghdad, they tested him. They took 100 hadiths, mixed up the chain and the text, and gave it to 10 people. And it sat in a big gathering. And they asked these people to read the hadith to test him. And they all read their hadith. And in each one, he said, La arifuhu, la arif, I do not know it, I do not know it. And when they're finished, he said that the first hadith you read, the chain of it was read by the third hadith you read. And the third hadith you read was connected to the fourth chain that you read. And like this, he went through the whole 100. So he didn't only, he demonstrated his power to memorize their mistakes and who had said it and when and in what order. So that's the kind of memory. Well, that was Imam Bukhari. But the point here is that in the nature of recital is public. It's open to public scrutiny. So you can't, there's no secrecy, no silence, no whispering. So to draw a parallel with Chinese whispers is completely disingenuous and devious. They have another aim. The purpose is to, as I said before, we go back to lesson number 13 and 12. Now to come back to the power of memory of the Arabs, and as a memory scientist, we know that things in the memory are connected through the connections. If you have clutter, then that affects it. Now, for the plain desert life people, the people who are living in a desert and the hardly any clutter, it was a perfect place for good memory to be fostered. And as I said last week, they memorized their lineages, the lineages of their animals, and the poetry was their main source of entertainment. Now, let me give you a few examples of how powerful their memories were. Take the great Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Abbas. A person that was sitting in a gathering, and a man came and he read a poem of 80 couplets. And someone objected to the couplets, to one of the couplets. And Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, no, he didn't say that. He said this. So this man pounced on Abdullah ibn Abbas and said, what, do you know this and this? And the man said, no, I wrote it last night. That, this is a new thing. And Abdullah ibn Umar said, but I know it. And he read the whole thing, 80, just by hearing it once. 80 poems, 80 couplets. Another person is Abdul Malik al-Ma'ruf bil-Asma'i. He went to, he was sitting with the Khalifa who was giving, responding to requests on cards. People come and make requests to the ruler, and these cards are read out and then they sign. And after finished, about 50 cards were read, and then he issued the ruling, give them what they should, the responses to it, their atiyah, the money that he would give or help, what sort of help they would get. And then in that gathering, a man said to the ruler, he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, ma qara'ta. What do you think about a person who says, ما قرأت كتابا قط فأحتاج أن أعود فيه ولا دخل قلبي شيء فخرج. He said, what do you think about a person who says that I read a book, every book I read, I do not need to return to it, and anything that enters into my heart cannot leave. So he's asking this, and Asma'i is sitting there in the gathering. Hassan ibn Sahal. So he answered straight away. He said he's actually talking about me, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin. He said he's talking about me. That he said that he وقد صدق, and he said yes, he's saying فإن الأمير قد نظر فيما نظر من الرقاء. And then he said, look, I'll show you. Just now, we just had 50 of these cards. You just read them out. I saw them while they were being read out, and I can tell you the names, and I can tell you the name of the people who and what was requested and what you ordered for them. And he said, really, you can? Okay, start, do it. And he did. He said, and then he said, ismuhu kada wa fawqiya lahu bikada, that his name is this person, and you offered him this, and you gave him this, and he went through. When he reached 47, another person sitting in the gathering, he said, look, save yourself from evil eye. So this story is recorded. Another one is a story of a great Imam Abu Bakr al-Ji'abi, and this is an important story linked to the bite size I gave you last week, because we think the scholars, when they were collecting hadith, they only relied on either their memory or the books, that these two weren't combined. But it is that in this case, you see that they were doing both, because he said, and this story is recorded in Siyar al-A'lam al-Nubala by Imam Dhahabi. He says that, and it's self-reporting. This is Imam al-Ji'abi is self-reporting it. He's saying, دخلت الرقة, Raqqa, you know Raqqa in Syria, where ISIS has made their headquarters. That same place, that same city. وكان لي ثمة قمطران كتب. He said he had 2 large cases of books, and his servant was carrying it, his slave who was traveling with him, and he left it somewhere outside when they went in, and when they came out, فجاء غلامي مغموما وقد ضاعت الكتب. So the servant comes and he's crying, he's really, really sad now, he doesn't know what he's going to say, and he said ضاعت الكتب, that the bags have been stolen, and these were all the books in there. And Imam Ji'abi said to him, لا تختم ابني يا ابني, oh my son, don't worry, don't be distressed, it's fine. فإن فيها 200,000 hadith. There's 200,000 hadith in it. ولا يشكل علي حديث منها, that none of it is difficult for me to rewrite. لا إسناده ولا متنه, not even its chain nor its text. I can rewrite them all because I have them all here. He lost he lost 2 cases of books with 200,000 hadiths, and he said, don't worry, I can write it back. Okay, now come to this. What's the time? You're going to have to bear with me a little more. I'm going to go over time now. If you want to listen to the funny story, or if not, we can finish. Okay, so now come to the story. This is that it's about, as writing became prominent, people's memories began to fade, obviously, and so these kind of people with marvelous memory were not as popular. They were not as frequent as they were in the early days. Just like we see now, with the arrival of the mobile phone, we've lost our ability to memorize phone numbers. You tell people to memorize the phone number, and they say, no, I can't. It's all this is a skill that we used to have 15 years, 20 years ago. Now, in the same case, as writing became popular, people depending on that, and depended on everything is right. So, but there were still a few people who had this skill, and obviously it's from Allah. But there was a ruler. His name was Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, and he's the man who built the round city, the Medina Salam, that then became Baghdad. So anyway, he came up with this scheme. He issued a challenge because he was one of those people who, if he hears a poem, no matter how long it is, if he hears it once, he will memorize it immediately just by hearing it once. And he had a slave boy, a servant, who, if he hears something twice, he would memorize it as well. And a girl, a servant girl, who would, if she hears it 3 times, she would memorize it as well. So the poems, it was big culture then. The source of entertainment was poetry, and they would come and read. The poets would come and read their lengthy poems in the court of the Khalifa, and he would give them gold on the basis of their poem. But then he came up with this scheme, this challenge. He issued a challenge. He was a funny man. I mean, he decided to say that if someone could come with a poem that I did not hear before, then I will give him the weight of what he has written his poem on in gold. I will, whatever he's written, his paper, I will take that paper, put it on the scale, and give you that amount in gold. So if you write a long poem, you'll get the scroll, whatever you write it on. So he said, but he didn't specify what you can write it on, but he just says what you wrote it on. And what he would do is these poets would spend their nights writing amazing poems, all night writing a poem, and they would come and read it to the Khalifa, and the Khalifa will listen and then say, yeah, but are you sure you wrote that poem? And he says, yes, I did. I wrote it all night. Yeah, I mean, this is I struggled hard on it. I was working all night on it. And he said, no, I think you forgot that you've probably copied it from somewhere else. I know that poem. He said, no, you cannot. And that he reads the whole poem back to him. And while he's doing that, the boy is behind the curtain, and so is the girl. So now the boy hears it twice. And he says, and the Khalifa then says to him, not only me, yeah, and the man is dumbfounded and thinking, the poet is saying, no, I don't know, maybe you memorized. He said, no, even my servant knows it. And he calls the boy out. The boy reads the poem, and then he said, even my slave girl knows it. And so she comes out and reads the poem as well. Anyway, the poem, the poets of Baghdad became depressed, because nobody could find a poem now that will that they can earn their living. It's like a real problem. Anyway, eventually one poet who was the master poet, Asma'i, he realized that what was going on, so he decided to take up the challenge. He took the challenge, and he said, and he wrote a poem. And for things to be connected in memory, for you to memorize stuff, it has to have a relationship of languages, language that you know, that you're familiar with. So that's how memory works. You connect from one to the other. So every sentence has to be connected to a sentence that you have a similar sentence. So you make a link. That's how pinning works in the memory. So that's how you link stuff. And he is a master poet and also a great person of great memory. So what he did, he wrote this poem, and instead of using the normal language that people use, he used completely unfamiliar language. It's Arabic. It's perfectly good language, but a completely different register. And in Arabic, in English, we have this word, what's it? Onomatopoeia or onomatopoeia, where the sound of things. So in Arabic, you have these sounds that you can do, and he added extra pronouns. Oh yes, pronouns. In today's world, he's talking about pronouns. So he added, like, for the word Sayyid, you would, if you were addressing someone, you will say Sayyidi, my master. But he added an extra pronoun. He didn't say. He said Sayyid, wa anta ya Sayyida li, instead of Sayyidi. Sayyida li, and wa Sayyidi wa Mawla li wa li. So he added lots of things like that in the poem, and he wrote the poem. The title of the poem was Sawtu Safir al-Bulbuli, that the voice of the warbling or the singing of the nightingale. And he came in and he said, yes, I heard, I need to take the challenge. I want to take the challenge, that I heard that you were going to give the gold of what is written on, if it's a new poem. So he reads this poem. وصوت سفير البلبل هيج قلبي الثمل الماء والزهر معا. And I'm going to read the difficult bits. He said, ومن لثم ورد الخجل قال لا ولا لا قد غدا مهرولي فولولت وولولت ولي ويا ويل لي فقلت لا تولولي يبيني اللؤل لي. So things like that, which it's impossible to memorize. So and then he also so he talked about the singing of the bird, and the bird made him remember his lover, and then and how beautiful the Khalifa, and then praise the Khalifa, and then talk about people's girls singing in a garden, and the drum, And he also uses the sound of the drum. He said, وَالْعُودُ دَنْدَنَ وَالْعُودُ دَنْدَنَ لِي وَالطَّبْلُ طَبْ 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 طَبَلِي طَبْ طَبَلِي وَطَبْ طَبْ طَبْ طَبَلِي وَلِي وَسَقْفُ سَقْ سَقَفِ لِي, and he وَالرَّقْصُ قَدْ طَابَ لِي. And so things like that he kept adding in the poem. And when that happens, then you lose the connections. At the end of the poem, so when he completed, he said to the Khalifa, "Al Samita, did you hear this poem before?" So the Khalifa realized now that he's trapped now, that this one, so he didn't even try. He didn't even try to repeat it. He said, no, I didn't. That's what I couldn't, because he didn't want to. He said, no, I didn't. But I think my servant might have. So he had a go. He called the boy. So the boy started off by saying, "Sawtu safiril bulbuli hayyaja qalbi thamali ma," and on the third one he fell off. And then I called the girl. The girl also didn't know it. So at the end, he said, "Well, I think you have earned the prize. So give me what you have written it on, so that we can weigh it. So that we'll give you the gold." He said, "Yeah, Amir al-Mu'minin, I've written it on a plaque, and it's outside." He said, "You know, plaque? What did you write it on?" He said, "I need it's an inheritance from my father, and I wanted to preserve it. And it's a plaque, a marble plaque. And وَلَا يَحْمِلُهُ إِلَّا أَرْبَعَةٌ مِّن جُنُودِكَ, and only I need help for 4 of your soldiers to bring it in." So when they heard that he was going to bring a big marble plaque now with this poem in, that would have emptied the treasury. So then they had a discussion, and he explained, said that you have tricked all the poets with this funny thing that you're doing. Just pay them for what they've done. And so he agreed to not empty the treasury and take the money and share and give the people their due. So, but the point of this was that this kind of memory does exist, and we don't see that nowadays. Maybe in World Memory Championships, but it's nothing like this. You don't see it like this. People with this sort of memory for reading and memorizing text, the numbers and these other things you can see. Anyway, yeah, it's the important thing is that to remember that culture was different, and the people had memories that were powerful, and those memories were put to use in the service of Deen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did this in his ultimate wisdom. He knew what was necessary and what would come in the future, and how his Deen will be preserved. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you all and guide you and help you to become mukhlisin, to get to put in action, to put into practice what you've learned in this series, because action, as we said, is important, not just learning. This is not just a academic intellectual exercise. It is about implementing it, working and trying to get these ideas, these practices into your daily life. And as what I said earlier about every day, you have to ask yourself, look, what have I produced for my akhirah today? At the end, you lie in bed and do muraqabah. You see, what have I produced? Yes, I've gone to work, I've earned X, Y, and Z. I've done this, I've done that. How much of Quran have I read? How much of dhikr did I do? How much of extra? Because Allah wants you, it's the extra thing that will bring you closer and closer to Allah. The compulsory things, yes, you will get close, but the thing that will bring you into the love of Allah, then hatta, he said that hatta uhibbuhu are the extra things that you do, the adhkar, the Quran, the good deeds that you do, the charity for the sake of Allah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and keep you safe, and bring you back, inshallah, after the holidays with renewed iman. And as always, I will advise that you go over this series in your own time. Make your own notes, because in making notes using the pen, allama bil qalam, when you write things, they have a greater impact on your ability to follow it and remember it and keep it in your consciousness. طيب, mashallah. Okay, let us pray. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Oh Allah, forgive us. Oh Allah, forgive us for our negligence about our ikhlas. Oh Allah, give us consciousness. Give us the consciousness to think. Give us the ability to be vigilant about our ikhlas. Guide us to your mercies, O Allah, Oh Allah, protect our hearts and minds from doubt and from all of these schemes of evil, the schemes of evil that shayateen and the followers of shayateen are trying to implant into our minds. Oh Allah, place our joy and happiness in only that which pleases you. Oh Allah, cleanse our hearts from the clutter and worldly pursuits and keep us steadfast in the straight path, on the straight path. Oh Allah, we are your servants. We are your slaves. We are your creation. We have no other to turn to but you. Accept our supplication and fill our hearts with divine love and guidance to your eternal success, to our eternal success, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, guide us to Jannah, guide us to the actions of Jannah. اللهم أنت ربنا لا إله إلا أنت خلقتنا ونحن عبادك ونحن على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعنا نعوذ بك من شر ما صنعنا ونبوء لك بذنوبنا ونبوء لك بنعمتك علينا يا رب يا كريم. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معاصيك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقواتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من عادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا تسلط علينا من لا يرحمنا يا رب يا كريم. اللهم واغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وألف بين قلوبهم وأصلح ذات بينهم وانصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم. اللهم ولا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا كربا إلا نفسته ولا ميتا من المسلمين إلا رحمته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة هي لك رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا أعنتنا على قضائها ويسرتها يا رب يا كريم يا إله الأولين والآخرين. اللهم أصلح لنا شأننا كله يا رب يا كريم. اللهم وفرج هم المهمومين ونفس كرب المكروبين واقض الدين عن المدينين واشف جميع مرضى المسلمين يا رب يا كريم. اللهم اشف جميع مرضى المسلمين يا رب يا كريم واشف جميع مرضى المسلمين يا رب يا كريم. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وصل اللهم على رسوله النبي الكريم وسلم تسليما كثيرا. آمين يا آمين. وصلى الله تعالى. طيب بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا. Inshallah we'll see you all in the new term if Allah keeps us alive. Please remember me in your dua. طيب السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.